Hi friends, and welcome back to Spring Fling. So today we're going to be talking about heirloom quilts. I have here in front of me an heirloom quilt that was made for my niece by my mother. The fun part is it captures 4 different grandmothers for my niece.
My mom and I worked together to make a small snuggle blanket for her. It had a nice satin binding and some beautiful ruffled corners. When we met her, my mom realized quickly that she wanted her to be able to snuggle with her grandma anytime she wanted. So she decided to make her a quilt. As she got going, she decided to add something a little extra to make it special. Instead of a hug from grandma, she got one from 4. This quilt memorializes the story of 4 generations of quilters and 6 generations of family.
So in all 4 corners, there is fabric from a different grandmother. So I have here Grandma Bohi, who is my great-great-grandmother. This corner is my mother. And then we have the bottom corners here. This is my grandmother, Grandma Feely. And this is my great-grandmother, Grandma Morgan. The story of this quilt is so fun for me. I know that my mother wanted to create an heirloom for my niece, that she could remember her grandmothers even if she hadn't met them yet.
The quilting is simple. As you can see here, she did some stitch in the ditch work. It's really simple and it matches the fabric that she chose here. So she stitched in the ditch to make a nice pinwheel shape, just to tack it down, similar to how you would when you would tie a quilt. She just wanted it to be simple and elegant so that it wouldn't detract from the piecing and the beautiful fabric that she selected. The fun part is she used minky on the back to make sure that it would be extra soft and fun for Cooper. Instead of using a blanket like she normally would, she did go and get some nice minky so that this would be a lasting quilt. When we flip it over to the back, you can see that as she made these continuous lines, it made an awesome snowflake pattern. When I borrowed this quilt from my sister, I remembered it being just a simple pinwheel. But what I realized is that this was actually the second block that Angelique taught Maddie in our beginning quilting series. You can see that this is actually the old windmill block. So instead of using a pinwheel where this would be your normal block, she actually did it as the old windmill where you get the quarter square triangles mixed with the half square triangles to make a third square triangle block. My mom used a fun stripe binding at my request because stripes are my very favorite. And it was interesting to see how she put it all together because typically my mom would stitch the binding with her machine onto the front and then hand sew onto the back with the mitered corners. But because she used minky on the back, she ended up stitching it to the back with the machine and then flipping it over and hand stitching along the binding to sew it to the front so that she didn't have to hand stitch with the minky.
So let me tell you a little bit about each person that's captured in this quilt. So here's a little bit about my mom, Jill. Growing up, she was a busybody. She was always moving and up to something, whether it was baking, sewing, scrapbooking, or even gardening. My mom made anything and everything she could. Everything she did was pretty much from scratch, from Valentine's cards to sheet cakes. She did it all. I remember standing on the edge of her sewing room as a little girl, just looking in awe at all of her tools and projects. And I remember wanting to do it so bad. As a little girl, she taught me to embroider tea towels. We'd sit on the couch and watch movies while we embroidered together. Quite honestly, I think it started as a way to just keep me quiet, but it turned into a genuine passion and a way for us to connect. From embroidery, we moved on to sewing. She taught me how to sew simple things like doll rugs and blankets. I learned how to hand stitch, and then eventually she taught me how to use her machine. Then we moved on to more complicated things like bean bags, microwave rice warmers, and even aprons. Finally, she taught me how to piece my own quilt tops. I would set up my machine on the dining room table and sew while she made homemade bread. It was an easy way for her to watch over me and make sure I didn't mess anything up. But one of the things my mom always stressed was perfection. If I messed up, she'd make me unpick my seams. I learned how much I hated unpicking, so in turn, I learned how to sew a straight seam. If my pieces didn't line up, I'd be back unpicking again. So I learned how to line up my seams so that I always had great points. My mom always had helpful tips and tricks to share, and she was always good about teaching me how to do something and not just doing it for me. My sewing relationship with my grandmother was a little bit different. She lived about 20 minutes away from my parents' house, so I spent a lot of time with her. She would take me and my siblings for the weekend, and we'd have sleepovers and fashion shows. Her sewing room was also the guest bedroom, and she had a giant sewing desk that was chock full of thread and notions and everything you could imagine. I remember my cousin and I sneaking in and opening the cabinet to look at all her thread. It was carefully organized in color order, and we would just stare at it. Later in life, I would bring my sewing machine all the way out to her house, and we would sew together. It was always so fun to make table runners and even quilts with her. Much like my mom, my grandma found joy in hand stitching. They never machine bound a quilt. Every quilt and even table runner was bound with an invisible hand stitch. It was just something that they found joy in. My mom's relationship with my grandma was a little bit different when it came to sewing. These are her words, so we'll go ahead and read them now. My mom often sewed clothing for our family when I was growing up. I remember her making special nightgowns and sewing late into the night 2 days before Christmas so that they would be ready for us on Christmas Eve. She was especially good at sewing baby clothes, and when my baby brother was born, most of his clothing was hand sewn by my mom. She's a really good seamstress, and I loved watching her sew and seeing all the beautiful things she made. For my wedding, she made a beautiful quilt that I used for many, many years. Moving on to the next generation is my great-grandmother, Grandma Morgan. Every summer, we would spend a few weeks in Sugar City, Idaho with my great-grandma. It was about an 18-hour drive with all the stops we ended up having to make. So it was a great time to work on an embroidery project or even to crochet a few washcloths or hot pads. My dad would drive all day and into the night until we made it to Grandma's house. Somehow, she was always awake, no matter what time we got there. A little suspicious if you ask me. Her house was always the most fun. She had fabric up the wazoo. I remember going into her basement and seeing wall-to-wall fabric, just boxes full of fun things. The interesting part about my grandma is that you could never ask for anything. If you asked, the answer was typically no. But if she caught you ogling something, she'd just give it to you. We'd always leave grandma's with some sort of project. Sometimes it was an apron or a pattern with fabric. Other times it was a pillowcase to embroider, but grandma made sure to keep us busy with our projects. Now, here's what my mom had to say about my Grandma Morgan. Grandma Morgan taught me to crochet edges for pillowcases and do embroidery on them. She had careful, tiny stitches, and her work was always beautiful. The pillowcases she taught me to make when I was in 6th grade, I entered into the county fair and won a blue ribbon for the work. I could never have done that without her careful and patient teaching. After I was married, I would visit her often, and she taught me how to make beautiful applique. She had old fabric from her mother that she would cut out flowers from, and we would applique them onto tea towels. She gave those to all of my children when they got married. Most memories I have of my grandma, she was either crocheting, beautiful intricate doilies, or sewing or making quilts. We had a lot of fun sewing on vacation, and I would often bring projects, and she would go down into her fabric room, which was more fabric than they carried at the fabric store. I have a lot of fond memories spending time with her quilting and making projects for other people. I remember as a young girl being at my grandma's house and everyone sat around her huge quilting frames and we got to tie quilts. All my aunts were there and my mom, and it was so much fun. She would have loved all the automated things you can do on a sewing machine now. The last generation captured in this quilt is my great-great-grandmother, Grandma Bohe. The funny thing about asking for stories of Grandma Bohe from both my mother and my grandma is that both of them had very similar things to say about her. Both of them mentioned her stove and the fact that her house was so clean you could eat off her floors. They both talked about her ability to garden and how great of a sewist she was. So let's hear it from Jill. I was very young when my grandma Bohi died. I remember going to her house and everything was spotlessly clean. She had a pantry off the kitchen where she kept her goodies, and we always wanted to know what was in that room. She grew up on a farm and worked hard, but her house always sparkled, especially her stove. I remember you could see your reflection in it. It was so shiny. She sewed garments for people, dresses, aprons, and she repaired clothing. She would keep the extra pieces and make beautiful aprons to sell or gift to her friends. She made up her own patterns and also made beautiful quilts. Now that you've heard the stories of each of the people captured in this quilt, I did just want to talk about how all of the fabric was acquired. It was kind of interesting to hear my mom's story on that. I asked her where she got it and where she came up with the idea, and she gave me a few tidbits here and there. So her fabric she bought at a local quilt shop. This is just something that she had, and it fit with her motif of pinks. But she embroidered her name right into the corner there. You can see it was her first time using her embroidery machine. So all of this was done with a machine. My grandma Bohi's fabric was given to her from my grandma Morgan a few years before she passed away. It was originally an apron that she had cut out the pattern for. So my mom took that apron and just cut it up because there were no instructions. So she went ahead, cut up that apron fabric and put it into this quilt to make a cute little block. My grandma Morgan's fabric is this fabric right here. And this fabric was given to my mother after she passed away. It was a gift from my grandmother to my mom because she knew she would be able to do something with the fabric. And it ties in so nicely to this quilt. My grandma Feely here, this was a fabric that she picked out on a local quilt shop. And I remember her expressing how excited she was to be included in such a fun memory quilt. The awesome part about this quilt is that my sister and my niece don't just keep it lying in a box unused. They use it regularly for carpet picnics and to build forts with. It's a cherished heirloom that we all love and enjoy.
It's well maintained and taken care of. You can see there's little stains on here from being used as a picnic blanket, but it doesn't ever diminish the value of the quilt. In fact, to me, it makes it more special, because her grandmas get to be involved in every carpet picnic she has.
Thank you so much for joining us on this segment of Spring Fling. We'd love to hear your commentary on any memories or stories you have to share of memory quilts or generational quilting. Share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Grace Company Quilting for more quilting content. See you later.